In August, a beautiful Mediterranean day. You know, the sky where the sun was shining bright, reflecting off the blue sea. We'd gotten up early to go buy fish from the market and to go water skiing before it was too rough in the sea. We got back around mid-morning. I went for a bike ride through the mountains. I climbed for 2 hours, and then I was sort of on the reward of my descent, if anyone's gone biking. And as I was coming around a sharp turn and thinking about lunch, I saw a car coming right at me. The next thing I remember was lying on the ground with a man hovering over me as I was there in the middle of the road. The good thing, I was completely conscious, but I was also completely paralyzed. But I also remember I had the helmet that saved my life. As I lie there, luckily, movement in my legs came back, but I still had no movement in my arms or upper body. I had what was later, I was told, was called central cord syndrome. It's basically where the nerves in your cervical spine, they're not cut, but they're severely damaged. Effectively, the brain has a thought, but it's lost its signal, and it can't talk to the rest of the body anymore. If it was a computer, it'd be like the CPU or the motherboard broke. I had emergency surgery in Marseille. I spent 4 weeks in the hospital. I had a year of physical therapy. And then basically I got back to normal, or what was thought to be normal. And I was one of the lucky ones. My body had rewired itself. But the reality was my body wasn't completely back to normal. And as my doctor said, the nerves rebuilt themselves, but they rewired themselves in a different way. You know, and what I'm left with basically is relatively normal life, but inside, a lot of the sensory stuff is basically wired a different way. Some things are actually kind of funky, like this left hand plays tricks on me. It's hypersensitive to heat. I'll pick up a cold glass of milk and I'll think it's boiling. Some of them, though, are more kind of change the way you feel every day. And, you know, not that I was that great at it, but I am no longer going to be a marathoner, or I'm going to be, play tennis anymore. You know, but it was hard to accept that, and the doctor said, get used to the new norm and start to redefine who you are. That was tough to hear, and I'd be lying to say I've completely accepted it. But it got me thinking about that need to embrace new norms and accept them and hopefully build off of them. Because otherwise, you really will be paralyzed. And that brings me back to kids in the digital future. It's an always-on connected world where information, content, and communication is always a fingertip away. And to them, that is the norm. It's only new to people like me and some of you who grew up reading a physical newspaper or writing letters by hand, or making sure long-distance phone calls weren't too long because they were going to cost a lot of money, you know, or going to the bookshelf or an encyclopedia to look something up, and the book was probably 10 years old. You know, it's basically, in this day and age, it's the adults that have to rewire themselves to adjust to the new reality. You know, and to give you an idea of how quickly it's changing, you know, in my most recent, one of my most recent jobs at Nickelodeon, we're all about kids and we're all about super serving them. And we've made a lot of digital content for 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. And we would test it all. In 2012, the funniest thing came along. We were like, oh my God, the mouse skills of 4-year-olds is actually degrading. Basically, we now have a new generation of kids who skipped the computer and went right to the tablet, and who knows if they would ever get there. And so one of the norms of the new norm is that things will rapidly, rapidly change. And it's in this world that kids will grow up with more possibilities, more informed, more connected, more open, faster paced, and perhaps smarter than any other generation. It's about democratization of information, but also of innovation. It's about unlimited self-learning and unlimited innovation. You know, in my house, my older son wakes up at 6:30 with the alarm from his iPhone. He gets up, he checks the weather on his iPhone. He looks and sees his schedule. Goes to his school website to see if there's any news. He texts his friend to meet him at 7:30. He gets dressed. He goes downstairs, eats breakfast, puts the iPhone down there, listens to music, says a couple of hi and goodbyes, and then he leaves. He lives in a completely connected world where he's empowered in every single part of his life, largely because of it. I am amazed that today, that a kid or anybody can have a curiosity or a passion or an interest, and they're fingertips away from sort of fulfilling it. Whether it's learning origami to make special things for a party, whether it's to learn how to play a song, whether it's to learn how to do a new magic trick. I'm amazed today that in a world of Skype, that an immigrant can now on a weekly basis talk to their sort of family or friends back home and have an intergenerational relationship that they never could have before. I'm amazed that a kid can play Minecraft, and while having fun, they can actually learn design skills and maybe build a side business selling to other people of how you build houses. I'm amazed that normally technology is actually a bigger divider between those with money and those with not so much. At least in the United States, the smartphone penetration has almost matched that for lower income than upper income, and actually as they kind of skipped the computers and went to a much more accessible technology. And so a world with equal opportunities, creativity, knowledge, connectivity, and efficiencies, it's amazing. Having said that, there's a lot of debate on whether some of it is bad. The biggest one obviously relates to screen time, And there are some stats out there, at least in the US, that are a little bit scary. The average 8 to 10-year-old spends 8 hours a day in front of a screen. The average maybe 12 or 13-year-old spends 11 hours. That's more than any other activity except for sleeping. And for some, it's more than sleeping. And that's a real concern, and a balanced sort of diet is necessary, particularly in terms of being active and going outside. Having said that, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and it's a lot more about what you're doing as opposed to where you're doing it, and we have to keep that in mind. The other big worry is privacy, and cyberbullying is what they call it back in the US. Again, another big concern. But the reality is, the extreme of protecting the kids from the digital world, that doesn't work. So therefore, you have to take a sort of a new mode. Watch over them, but it's really about instilling parents and adults in society, instilling values so that they can be their own guide and their own filter. And I came across a really sort of adult example of one of the oldest sort of institutions in the US, the US Army, with 1 million soldiers, 240 years of history. They completely rewired themselves to address a similar issue. They realized in 2009 that between the way warfare was changing because of technology and between the way the soldiers were changed because they grew up with technology, that the old way of command and control, where basically they told them what the mission was and they told them exactly how to do it, was becoming obsolete. So they switched to one of mission control, where the commanders, the parents, told them what the goal of the mission was, the values, and then they told the soldiers, the kids, that basically you go figure out the technical and be innovative because you're on the ground and you're going to know more than anyone else. The same issues in business, hyper-competitive business. In a world, if you don't rewire yourself, you're dead. And it's the simple stat is 5 years ago, only 2 of the companies that were in the top 10 in size are actually in the top 10 today. And it's even more sort of scary when you think of all the big companies that are growing fast that you think are cutting in innovative, or all the ones that were actually wired and born in the digital generation, as opposed to ones that have transformed. It's the Google, it's the Facebook, it's the Amazon, and now the Alibaba. And the really good ones of those in the fast-paced world have figured out how to rewire themselves as it goes from desktop to mobile or social or search to social. And the ones that didn't, like a Yahoo or a AOL, they're pretty much obsolete. With the one great exception, obviously, being Apple, which is 40 years old and was almost dead, but rewired themselves and not only helped themselves relevant, they helped actually create the next sort of digital revolution. And none of that, is obviously easy. And perhaps some of the most exciting rewirings going on, you're starting to see with parents and teachers, those who influence kids the most. With parents, what we're seeing, at least in the US, they actually over-index kids with households in terms of ownership of smartphones and tablets at 75% and 60%. And perhaps the most exciting thing is that 86% of parents believe that their kids' digital savviness will be a predictor of their future success. And teachers, particularly younger teachers, the millennial teachers effectively, are also seeing this. About 86% of them realize that sort of personal learning is only going to be possible with technology. 3 out of 4 of them think that apps are crucial to learning. 81% think tablets are crucial to learning. 37%, I think overly optimistic, think that in 5 years we won't be using textbooks, they'll just be using tablets. And even they've embraced gaming, with 74% of them saying gaming is an important part of their curriculum, for at least the younger kids, as it teaches problem solving, quick decision making, and some of the realities of survival and failure. And then finally, some of the testing's coming out where those classrooms integrated technology are performing better and they're having much more higher engaged students. So we live in this world where technology is part of every day. And one of the exciting things, probably for the first time, at least I can think of, kids are actually the authority in something that's important to the future of the world. And while you need a balanced diet of activities, I will say one of the interesting things is Lego, which is as low tech of a kid product as the world, has actually seen rapid growth, including here in China, and is now the largest toy company in the world. But the reality is the new norm is a connected world. You know, and a lot of people say that for a company, a lot of its future value creation will come from having a digital sort of competency and fluency. I think you can start to say the same thing about people. I think that you look at Darwin's survival of the fittest, that inevitably, you know, you'll see the chapter on digital competence and sort of help doing it, along with hunting back in the caveman, perhaps. And the reality is, though, for any of this to happen, it's the adults that have to rewire themselves, because they're the guides of the kids and they're the guides of the institutions. And you want to give the power of technology to those who have no inhibitions. So I kind of sit here and I can't wait to see what kids are going to do next. You know, inevitably the ride is going to be bumpy, but it's going to be an exciting one. As long as everyone's wearing their helmet, they'll be fine. Thank you.